CG Chatter is life.
Hey guys, how's it going? This is Eric Carlson from cgchatter.com, where we chat about the art, business, and lifestyle of creating computer graphics. So in this video tutorial, I'm going to cover some basic techniques for creating parallax in After Effects, which will hopefully help you to start incorporating parallax into your own scenes. So first of all, I'm going to quickly go over what parallax is. So say that you are driving down a turnpike and you have a camera with you. That's what this is. And there's a guardrail along the turnpike and some grass. And then you have some trees right next to the road. And then way off in the distance, you have some mountains. It's like a string of mountains. And now from your perspective, as you're zipping down this highway, first of all, the trees and guardrail and all that stuff seems to be moving by really quickly, just as fast as you are. And they also seem to be pretty big in relation to you. Whereas the mountains, off in the distance, they seem to be much smaller in relation to the trees, and they also seem to be moving much slower. So, say this is what you're seeing, and you have the trees, right? They seem to be pretty big, and then the mountains are very small, and the trees are moving really fast, and the mountains not so much. So this effect is essentially parallax. So that gives a nice sense of depth when you see something like this, nice sense of 3D. You feel like these are separate layers. And I'm going to walk through how to do some of this in After Effects. So I made this basic scene here for this tutorial, and it's just a cityscape with some buildings. And so if we move around this as just a flat image, it's not that exciting. You're just kind of moving side to side and zooming in and out on a flat image. There's not a lot of depth to it. But if you make it into a 3D parallax scene, here's an example of moving in. I added some motion to these and depth of field, and that has a nice sense of depth to it. And then here's another camera move side to side, also seems pretty nice. So that's essentially parallax. And by making these in 2.5D, which is in 3D space in After Effects, but using flat layers, even though they're flat, and if you go sideways, they're paper thin, you still get a nice sense of depth there. You can zoom in and out, move side to side. So you still get that nice 3D feel. So I'm going to walk through how to set this up. So we'll bring in the assets I made. So it's a Photoshop document. And now when I bring these in, I like to do retain layer sizes. So if I open up this new comp, what that means is that each object is cropped around itself. And if I hadn't done that, you would have had one big box around each layer. So basically I might click anywhere in the scene, but it would only select the top layers. This just makes it easier to work with. So now that I have that, I'm going to make a new composition. Let's go 1280, 720. That's good. And now instead of simply dragging these layers directly in, I'm going to go into that new composition that was made because they're all positioned here. If I just drag them in, they would just be automatically centered. So I will select these guys, copy them, Control C, and then Control V, paste it in. And now we'll make them all 3D, except for this last layer, because I think that's just a color, so that can just stay as a flat layer. And now that we have them 3D, we will make a new camera. 35 millimeters, good. Place that in. And now with the camera, I like to go to the unified camera tool, and you can hit C to cycle through these and just kind of position it from there. So middle mouse button to pan, right mouse button to zoom, left mouse button to rotate. So as I rotate, you see it's still a kind of flat image. So to fix that, we're going to go to two views here, and we're going to start spreading out our layers. So first I'm going to take my cloud layer and move that way back. Let's see how far back that is. I think the last one I figured out, and you kind of want to tweak these, but I think it was around 17,000. But it's just kind of trial and error, see what feels the best. So that's back there. It's really small now, so I'm going to scale it up and move it up there. And then I'm just going to start doing this with all the layers, basically just spreading them out in space. I'll move the camera down a little bit so I can see more of what's going on. So that's the distant silhouettes of buildings, and then bring this back. Okay, these are more silhouettes. Those over. Oh, that was holding down the shift key, which is a mistake. All right, move this over. Next layer. And so I like to have the top view up here so that I can just get a sense of how spaced apart they are in Z depth. So move that back. Move this guy over a little. Okay. And then move this guy. Actually, this could be pretty close to where the camera is. Maybe we'll move this one up a little bit too. Okay. And then this guy, maybe we'll move that closer to the camera. And then as I've been going, you've noticed that I've been scaling these. So you want it to still look, once you have them all positioned, you want it to still look sort of like the original image you had. I mean, you might want to be repositioning some things a little. But, you know, if I kept them all the same scale, obviously the things in the far distance would become much smaller, which is what actually happens. But because I drew it with the perspective already built in, you want to make sure you adjust those. And then we have these couple pieces of newspaper, which are just kind of there as fun extra elements. So now if we go to one view and rotate, you'll see I have some depth here. Things are kind of spread out. So I won't take as much time to tweak this as I did with the other one, but you might want to tweak it more or less to get a little bit more of a sense of depth. So let's see. We just animate a camera move. So maybe we'll start here and then just kind of push in. So that's one way to do it. And actually, I'll also demo moving side to side. So let's say we start over here. And I'll get rid of this. And then move to, you know, here. So then you want to start adjusting your objects based on where you're moving. So this would have to come over a little bit. Now, one thing to be aware of is if I had gone a little bit further, you see I start to see the edges of these objects here, and that's something to always watch out for. And if you're working with say a split up photo that maybe you made into separate layers or another type of composition, you want to be careful about the edges here and make sure that those don't come into view. So if that's the case, you can either adjust your camera or you go back to some of those layers and just kind of move them over to fill that space. So, and then I'll move this guy over, maybe make it bigger. All right, so looking pretty good. We got a nice 3D scene. These buildings are all moving at different speeds. You have a nice sense of depth and parallax there. Another thing you could do is you could add depth of field to your camera. And then I'll crank up the aperture a little bit. And then focus distance, you can kind of set that wherever you want. You can animate it if you want. So that's something nice to play with. Another thing I like to do, you know, these objects, one thing you can do, I mean, you don't want to rotate too much. Obviously, this is paper, so you can get away with it more. But it's fun to add some slight rotation to some objects. So that then as you're moving by them, they might just feel a little bit more 3D, like if you had a ground plane built in. Let's rotate this guy a little bit too. And then you could also add motion to these like I did before. So let's start this one here, and then we'll just kind of, you know, move it along, and maybe it rotates. So that's just moving a little bit, and then this one could be moving too. Since I can't, there we go. I'll get it over here. All right, so position, orientation, key those, and then here, maybe that's also kind of gliding. Yeah, you know, just some subtle movement. we'll do it even more than that. Actually, now it's easy to get caught up in little things like this, as you're realizing right now. So you don't want to spend too much time on it, but just, give it some movement. So, those are the basics there. There are a couple things to watch out for. One of the things is resolution. So particularly if you don't have depth of field, if you zoom in too close on an object, so let's say, we zoom in really close down here and we don't have depth of field, just get that turned off. This starts to get a little bit pixely, right? Now, there are a couple ways to deal with this. One is to just simply make a bigger composition when you start. Another thing you can do is say that you have an Illustrator file, which is vector-based. Those are kind of nice because those, just like text, you can make them as big as you want and they won't distort. Now, one important thing to be aware of though, so say that I make this thing really big. You see it's starting to get kind of pixely there. You want to be sure to always check this box, which is continuously rasterize, and that makes sure these things stay crisp no matter how close you get. So that's really important to do. Otherwise, it will just keep it at the original size, which might not be big enough for your composition. Another thing, as I was kind of covering before, is the rotation. So you want to be sure that if you're rotating, don't rotate too far lest you give away that these are just really flat objects in 3D space. So I guess those are the basics. Let me see if there are any other things I can tell you. So when you're bringing in layers, you want to be sure that they are numbered if you want to keep them in order. So what I did with my composition is I labeled things so that they would all be in order when I brought them in. So the objects closest to the front, you want to start with the lowest number, and then furthest to the back have the highest number. And other things you can do is you can play with camera settings. So maybe you want your camera to have a much lower preset, which means things will have much more of a kind of warpy effect to them, which can look kind of cool. So all kinds of things you can play with. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. If this was helpful for you, I'd love to hear about it. So please share this, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And you can also visit cgchatter.com for more great content. So thanks for watching and hope to see you again. All right, bye.